Magic has slowly gone from being the best combat style to being the worst combat style at the higher end of gameplay, given that you have all of those important unlocks for ranged and melee. In this video I'm going to cover how Magic slowly lost its spot as the top combat style, so when you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Back in 2013, all three combat styles got their first 290 weapons, starting with Drygores from Kalphite King, followed by Ascensions from Legiones, and then finally Seismics dropped by Virago. In 2013, all three combat styles also received their tier 90 armor sets, being Sirenic, Tectonic, and Malevolent. And in all honesty, you could say that the combat triangle was fairly balanced, at least on paper. The big difference was that Magic had utility spells while ranged and melee did not. Magic had debuffs, the vulnerability spell increasing your damage by 10% for a minute, and even metamorphoses, which before the time of Sunshine and Death Swiftness was 100% used in a rotation. Over time, after Invention and Gold Rush Dungeon 2, things slowly started to change. First up, Mechanized Chinchompas, giving ranged the AoE damage potential of a freaking cluster bomb every single attack, exceeding far beyond Magic's AoE potential, even though Magic has a much better area of effect threshold being Detonate. And before anyone mentions the Corruption Blast ability, this doesn't matter as both Ranged and Magic had access to these types of abilities at the time, as both were released at the same time from raids in 2015. Next up was Telos, dropping 3 292 weapons being the Seren Godbow, Staff of Sliske, and Zaros Godsword. At the time, the Staff of Sliske spec and Seren Godbow spec were not that good, but the Zaros Godsword spec sure was. Let me explain why the Zaros Godsword was such a big deal. Given that you've done the World's Wakes quest, you have a ability for ranged and magic that increases your damage by 50% for 30 seconds, which can be increased by using the Planted Feet perk. These abilities are called Sunshine and Death Swiftness. Now, Melee instead had the Berserk ability, which increases your damage by 100% for around 20 seconds, but also increases the damage you take by 50%. Now, the World's Wakes quest didn't give an ability to Melee that functioned the same as Sunshine and Death Swiftness, but the ZGS, or the Zaros Godsword, did. This special attack was called Black Hole, and it increased your damage by 25% for 20 seconds once activated. Now, this isn't the same 50% as the ranged and magic abilities, but remember that Melee also still has Berserk. In 2017, Melee saw another interesting increase to its potential, being the Belated Dive ability released with the Shattered Worlds minigame. Now, this ability might not sound like it changes your damage output much on paper, but when used in the right way, in the right situation, it contributes to damage output and damage prevention, because unlike with Surge and Escape, Bladed Dive allows you to move with great precision. In January of 2018, Runescape had a small update that changed ranged forever. Enchanted but Criminal Bolts. These bolts could be used with any crossbow type weapon, and they increased range DPS significantly. These bolts contribute to Magic being a lot worse in DPS simply because they are a straight up damage increase, and now with the greater ricochet ability, which I'll get to later, they have a high chance of proccing, which makes ranged even better. Meleescape also continued to become better in 2018, but on August the 13th, 2018, it completely blew other combat styles out of the water. The Dragon King Lab, aka Elite Dungeon 2 update, added not one, not two, but 3 powerful melee abilities to the game. The most powerful of these 3 being the Mutated Barge ability, now known as Greater Barge, allowing the player to bleed channeled thresholds like Assault, Destroy, and Flurry. The trend continued, and in 2019, Melee got some stupidly busted armor called Trim Masterwork, allowing you to bleed massive hits from bosses in damage over time instead, increasing your survivability when using Melee for PvM. In 2019, Magic's utility in terms of the vulnerability spell being limited to the Magic combat style changed, as a new sigil item called the Ingenuity of the Humans was added, allowing you to cast vulnerability without using magic gear. In November, Magic limited utility spells were quite literally killed as new potions called bombs were added to the game. And you guessed it, sticky and vulnerability bombs were part of that update. And in 2019, range got even more power creep because the Eldritch Crossbow was released with the Elite Dungeon 3 aka Shadow Reef update. And it's safe to say that the Eldritch Crossbow spec is very, very powerful. And that's 3 elite dungeons added to the game and no new magic equipment, but new melee things and new ranged things. And the final thing worth mentioning, with the new Raksha boss release, ranged got the greater ricochet ability and magic got the greater chain ability, but for whatever reason, these greater versions of these abilities are different as of recording this video. The greater chain ability is more AoE focused, and the greater ricochet ability is more single target DPS focused. Again, adding to the DPS potential of range, which is already better than magic simply because of the criminal bolts. Does this mean that if you're using a Noxious Staff and your magic gear at a boss, you're doing significantly worse? Not per se, it's still a tier 90 weapon, you're still doing decent damage, but ranged and melee, given that you have the upgrades and you're using criminal bolts of range, are just simply better overall combat styles as of right now. What made magic good in 2013 was the utility. That utility has now been killed by Jagex because every single combat style has access to that utility. You can stun creatures by using sticky bombs, you can vuln creatures. In fact, you can vuln them a lot easier than using the spell, and it's an area of effect vuln with vulnerability bombs, simply meaning that vulnerability with magic is irrelevant apart from if you want to save some money because bombs are a slight bit expensive to use. Damage-wise, magic did fine, but now melee has insane burst damage. You can decrease the cooldown on Berserk by using Mutated Flurry. You have the Criminal Bolts for range, you have the Eldritch Crossbow spec, the Saren Goldbow got a buff, making it even better, making range extremely powerful against large targets. Meanwhile, magic still doesn't have any good spec apart from the Gothic Staff, which combined with the Essence of Finality is still pretty good, but so are the Dragon Claws and Dragon Dagger inside an EOF, and so is the Dark Bow for range inside an EOF. Now, because we don't get as many bossing or power creep updates per year as when compared to 2013, the imbalances of the combat triangle will stick around for longer in comparison to back then. For example, in 2013 we had multiple new bosses, we had tier 90 sets for all 3 styles, we had tier 90 armor for all 3 styles. Now imagine if we had that now, we had the tier 92 armor update. What if we had all of that in 1 year? What if we had 3 great abilities for melee, 3 great abilities for magic, and 3 great abilities for range? Now of course, development time, bugs, problems, creative ideas, it's all part of, designing content, but imagine if we had that in 1 year. That would mean that magic might already be as good as range and melee again, because I assume in Gold Rush Dungeon 3 we might have some magic updates or new magic abilities, mutated Conch Blast, mutated Impact, mutated Whack, mutated Surge, I don't know, it could be anything. What I'm trying to say here is that there's going to be a larger gap in time before magic gets a significant buff, unless they end up changing Greater Chain anytime soon. But as of this point, as of recording this video, magic is weaker than ranged and melee in almost every single bossing situation. Now magic will outclass melee and definitely ranged in some slayer tasks, especially if you're using the Inquisitor's Staff and Greater Chain, but it isn't many tasks. 90% of all slayer tasks can be powered through using melee and a scythe, and it will be better than magic and ranged. There are some exceptions where ranged is actually the best, and one of them is chinning Abyssal Demons, but that's a rare exception. The combat triangle needs to be different, but it needs to be balanced. Melee should have more damage potential because of the drawback of not being able to attack on the move. But when 2 combat classes outclass the other in the same way, being single target DPS, there's something wrong. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it interesting, and this is the end of the video. Feel free to leave your thoughts down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.